In this lesson, you will learn about FortiSwitch essentials, focusing on basic administration and VLANs. In this lesson, you will learn about the topics shown on this slide. After completing this section, you should be able to achieve the objectives shown on this slide. By demonstrating competence in basic administration, you will learn about some basic administrative tasks you can perform on FortiSwitch when it is operating in managed switch mode. The administrative access on a managed switch is controlled by the access profile assigned to that switch. A factory default access profile named default is assigned to the switch after it is authorized on FortiGate. The default access profile has HTTPS, ping, and SSH administrative access enabled for both the management and internal interfaces. If you need to edit the administrative access on a switch, you must create a new access profile and assign it to the switch or edit the existing default access profile. When you first log into FortiSwitch or after a factory reset, the system requires you to set a new password for the administrative account. This enhancement ensures that the administrative account does not operate with an empty password, improving overall security. The administrator password on a managed switch is controlled by the switch profile assigned to that switch. A factory default switch profile named default is assigned to the switch after it is authorized on FortiGate. The default switch profile does not change the administrator user password set locally on the switch. If you need to override the administrator password set locally on the switch and replace it with a different password, you must create a new switch profile and assign it to the switch or edit the existing default switch profile. FortiSwitch supports memory and syslog logging only. FortiSwitch does not support disk logging. Memory logging is enabled by default on FortiSwitch. However, when logging to memory, the amount of space allocated to logs is very small, and a switch reboot results in the removal of all logs stored in memory. For this reason, when you manage a switch on FortiGate, the switch also exports the logs to FortiGate so they can be stored on FortiGate and displayed on the GUI. FortiSwitch sends its logs to FortiGate through CAPWAP. FortiGate then stores the FortiSwitch logs on all its enabled logging devices, memory, disk, FortiAnalyzer, and syslog. Also, by default, FortiSwitch sends logs that are assigned a severity level of information or higher to FortiGate. You can set a different log severity level either globally or per FortiSwitch, as shown on the slide. This slide shows an example of some FortiSwitch logs displayed on the FortiGate GUI. FortiSwitch logs are available as event logs on the FortiGate GUI under FortiSwitch events. You can upgrade the firmware on a switch using the FortiGate GUI. Open the Managed FortiSwitches page, select the target switch, and then click Upgrade. Then, you can choose to have FortiGate download the firmware upgrade file from FortiGuard or upload your local firmware image. After FortiGate starts pushing the firmware image to the switch status shows image downloading. After the switch receives the file, the switch reboots as part of the firmware upgrade process. As a result, the switch status changes to offline, and then back to online after it finishes the upgrade process and joins the switch controller again. The default firmware upgrade method is HTTPS. You can also use CAPWAP as an alternative upgrade method. HTTPS is recommended because of its higher scalability and performance. You can also upgrade the firmware of a switch using the FortiGate CLI. For this, you must first upload the target firmware image to FortiGate from an FTP or TFTP server. Note that FortiGate can store only one image per switch model. This means that if you upload another image for the same switch model, FortiGate overwrites the existing one. In addition, when saving the firmware image file, FortiGate saves the file under a different name than the original file name. The example on this slide shows how you can use the FortiGate CLI to upload a firmware image using FTP, and how you can get the list of all switch firmware image files stored on FortiGate. Good job. You now know how to perform basic administrative tasks on FortiSwitch working in managed switch mode. Now, you will learn about VLANs.